So here's the thing. I had to relocate for my job, and if you've ever been in that position, you know how overwhelming it is. You need somewhere fast, but you're also trying to balance your budget. My office wasn't in the most expensive part of town, but it wasn't exactly cheap either. So I posted ads everywhere: Facebook, Craigslist, even the neighborhood subreddit. I had to take what I could get, honestly. That's when Ethan messaged me. I remember looking at his profile. It seemed fine, just your average guy, nothing weird standing out. He said he had a room available, and the price was reasonable. Honestly, I didn't have time to be picky. The clock was ticking and I had to get somewhere to sleep. So we set up a video call. Now, looking back, I don't know if I was just desperate or if I was ignoring red flags, but he didn't seem off. Not at all. He gave me a virtual tour of the house, nothing fancy, but it seemed okay. Some of the furniture was worn, but I wasn't looking for a palace. It was functional. And Ethan, he seemed genuinely nice. Polite, a little eager to please, but in a friendly way. He said he'd had roommates before, so he knew how it worked. There was nothing about the call that gave me any pause. My parents hated the idea of me living with a guy I didn't know, especially after everything that had happened to women in the news. But I didn't have time to deal with their concerns. I just needed somewhere to stay. So I made my decision. A week later, I packed up everything I had and drove down to move in, hoping everything would work out. The first time I met Ethan in person, I didn't quite know what to expect. The guy I'd talked to on the phone was pretty normal, so I figured he'd be the same in real life. But then he opened the door, and immediately, something felt. He was shorter than I expected, which sounds weird, but it threw me off for some reason. He was eye level with me, which made the whole greeting a little more awkward than I'd like to admit. But whatever. I shook it off. People have their quirks. We shook hands, and he helped me bring my bags inside. The house? It was fine. A little dated, but not terrible. It had that lived-in feel, you know? The kind of place where the paint's peeling a little, and the carpet's seen better days. But it's clean. He showed me my room. It was small but comfortable enough. He said I could move in right away, and his last roommate had just left. I didn't think too much of it. At the time, everything seemed fine. But looking back, the way Ethan acted was a little too eager. He was constantly around, checking in, offering to help with little things. It was nice, but it felt like he was trying too hard. I couldn't tell if he was just being friendly, or if he was trying to compensate for something. He kept suggesting we go out for lunch or drinks, and at first, I just chalked it up to him being nice, maybe a little lonely. But after a few times, I started to feel uncomfortable. It wasn't that he was being overly friendly. He wasn't pushing boundaries or anything. But it felt like he was always there, always trying to get my attention. And then there were the little things, the way he'd show up randomly when I'd be cooking or just hanging out in my room. I didn't think much of it at first, but the more it happened, the more it felt like I was being watched. Maybe I was just paranoid, but something about Ethan didn't sit right. Something felt off, but I kept telling myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always lurking around. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, but there was one night when everything changed, and I couldn't ignore the creeping suspicion any longer. It started innocently enough, just me doing laundry. I'd had a long week, and I was glad to finally have some time to do chores. But when I went to grab my hamper, something didn't feel right. The clothes weren't arranged the way I'd left them. It wasn't a big change, just a subtle difference. Still, it was enough to make me pause. I shrugged it off, blaming my tired mind for making a big deal out of nothing. But then, as I was loading the washing machine, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. One of my underwear was missing. It wasn't a small thing I could easily dismiss. This was personal. I tried to convince myself I had just misplaced it, but I knew I hadn't. I checked the entire room, the laundry basket, and even the trash can, just in case. Nothing. It was gone. I didn't want to think it. I didn't want to even consider the possibility. But the thought hit me like a cold slap. Could Ethan have taken it? The idea seemed impossible. We hadn't even talked about anything like that. But still, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The way my clothes had been shifted around, the way something so personal just vanished without explanation. It was too much of a coincidence. I hesitated, paralyzed by the idea of confronting him. It felt like too small a thing to accuse someone over. So I kept quiet, but the seed had been planted, and it was growing. The next day I went to the hardware store and bought a lock for my door. I didn't care if it seemed dramatic or excessive. I needed that extra layer of security. I wasn't sure what was going on, but one thing was certain: I didn't feel safe anymore. Not in that house, not with Ethan. I wasn't even looking for it. It was just one of those random days when I was tidying up my room, straightening a picture frame, adjusting my pillow on the bed. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, out of the corner of my eye, something caught my attention. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there. A tiny, blinking red light. It was coming from the vent above my bed. My stomach dropped and everything else seemed to freeze. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it, but I could feel the blood drain from my face. I don't know why I didn't move. I think I was hoping I was just seeing things. Maybe the light was a reflection or something mundane, but deep down I knew better. I stepped closer to the vent, and there it was. Small, almost hidden, but undeniably a camera. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the weight of the air pressing down on me. I didn't want to believe it. Was this really happening? How could this be real? I tried to convince myself that maybe it was a mistake, some sort of misunderstanding. Maybe it was part of a security system for the house, and I had just never noticed it before. But that didn't make sense. The red light, the placement right above my bed, everything about it screamed something else entirely. I couldn't bring myself to confront Ethan. Not immediately, anyway. I guess I was too scared of what his response might be, too scared of what I might learn if I asked. Or maybe I didn't want to admit that I had been living in a house with someone who could do something like this. So I just let it sit there. The camera blinking, almost like it was watching me. I could feel it gnawing at me, day after day. What had he seen? Had he been watching me the whole time? The thought made my skin crawl, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being hunted, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. After a few weeks of living in the house, things started to feel off. I don't know how to explain it, but there was this underlying tension, like there was something lurking just beneath the surface that I wasn't meant to see. The house, for the most part, seemed ordinary enough, until I noticed that door, the one in the hallway. It was always locked. Never once did Ethan mention it, and I found myself wondering why. It wasn't like I was snooping, but my curiosity slowly started to eat at me. Why was that door always locked? What could possibly be behind it? And most importantly, why wouldn't he just tell me? I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just a storage room or something. But with each passing day, the more I noticed it, the more the question gnawed at the back of my mind. What was behind that door? One afternoon, Ethan wasn't home. I had the house to myself, and for the first time I actually found myself standing in front of the door, hand on the handle, feeling my pulse quicken. I don't know what came over me. My heart was racing as I turned the knob, and when it gave way, I nearly froze. The room beyond it was a mess, filled with old boxes, piles of junk, and clutter. It didn't look like anything special at first, just stuff, but as soon as I stepped inside, it hit me. The air in that room was thick, stale, and heavy. There was a smell, a musty, suffocating stench, and it made me want to choke. It felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. Why would anyone keep this room locked? What was he hiding? Why had he never mentioned it? I stood there for a moment, too scared to go further, but too curious to leave right away. My skin prickled, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something about the room made me feel trapped. I wanted to know what was in those boxes, but I also knew I needed to leave. Just as I turned to go, I heard it. The sound of Ethan's car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. I locked the door behind me quickly and stepped away, trying to act casual, but there was no way I could pretend like I hadn't just been inside. I couldn't bring myself to tell him. I didn't have any proof, but I could feel it. That room held something important, and I was starting to think that it had everything to do with what had been happening to me. I remember that night so clearly. Even now, it was like every detail is etched into my memory. I woke up suddenly, the kind of waking that's just on the edge of a dream, still foggy, but something felt off. It was the sound that pulled me from my sleep, barely audible at first, but slowly, steadily, it grew louder. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. I held my breath, straining to listen. The footsteps weren't my own. They were coming toward my room. My heart skipped a beat. I was frozen, eyes wide open, staring at the door. I didn't even know how to process what was happening. My door was locked. There was no way Ethan could just walk in without a key. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were closer now, so close I could almost feel them. My mind raced. I was trying to convince myself it wasn't what I thought, but deep down I knew it was. Then the door handle turned. My entire body went rigid. I didn't dare move, didn't even breathe. I was terrified, paralyzed really. I didn't know what to do. Should I hide? Should I run? Should I confront him? But I couldn't move. I just lay there staring at the door like if I kept my eyes on it, maybe everything would go back to normal. Maybe he'd just go away. But nothing happened. The footsteps retreated, and I heard the silence return. Complete, deafening silence. It felt like hours passed, even though it was probably just minutes. I didn't dare move. I couldn't. I just stayed there, still as a statue, too scared to even blink. My mind was racing 1,000 miles a minute. How had he gotten in? Did he have a spare key? Had he been standing outside my door waiting for me to open it? Or was this something else altogether? Something worse. I didn't feel safe anymore. The room felt smaller, suffocating. I had no idea what I was supposed to do now. What if he was just waiting for me to make the first move? I couldn't sleep after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even though I couldn't explain why. How had I let it get this far? I had to get out, but how? And where would I even go? It was a normal afternoon, or at least it felt like one, until it wasn't. I was going about my business when I heard a knock at the door. At first I thought it was just another delivery, or maybe a neighbor needing something. But when I opened it, there she was, a girl around my age looking over her shoulder like she was worried someone might be watching. She didn't waste any time. "Are you living here with Ethan?" she asked, her voice shaky but urgent. I nodded, a bit confused, but she didn't give me a chance to respond properly before she spoke again. "You need to leave," she said, her words quick and sharp, almost as if she was afraid someone might hear. She looked around again like she was checking if anyone was following her. I didn't understand what she meant at first. Leave? Why? That's when she told me everything I had been too afraid to admit. Ethan had restraining orders against him from multiple women, she said. They had all reported him for stalking. The details she didn't go into, but I didn't need them. The terror in her eyes said more than words ever could. She told me she had been his roommate before, that she barely managed to get away. My stomach turned as the words settled into my mind. I wanted to deny it. I tried to push it out of my head. How could I have missed all the signs? But she handed me her number and told me to call her if I needed help, that she would be there for me. She was gone almost as quickly as she'd come, disappearing down the street before I could process it all. I was shaken, terrified, even. Everything, the way Ethan had been acting, the way he'd been too attentive, the locked door, the cameras, it all clicked into place, but that made it worse. How had I let myself get this far? How had I been so blind? I started packing that same day. I knew I couldn't stay, but with everything already paid for, I didn't know how I could leave without confrontation. My mind raced, but the more I thought about it, the more my fear grew. Was I already in too deep, and would Ethan let me leave without a fight? I didn't feel safe in my own skin anymore. You know when your life hits that weird low-budget thriller phase? That was me. Everything had gone off the rails with my parents. I won't get into the details, but it got ugly fast, and I was couch surfing like a pro, just bouncing between friends' places, trying to act like it was temporary, but honestly, I was running out of options. It was either find a place or sleep in my car. So one night, half delirious from scrolling through roommate ads, I saw this post from a guy named Evan. He had a room available in this quiet little duplex just outside the city. The price was kind of suspiciously good, especially for the area, but I was desperate, so I clicked. The ad was super specific, like uncomfortably specific. No parties, no guests, no drinking in the living room, and definitely no going into the basement. That part was in all caps. I figured, hey, maybe he just had bad experiences with past roommates or whatever. People are weird. I've seen worse. We set up a viewing the next day. First thing I noticed when he opened the door, Evan looked off. Not in a horror movie kind of way. Just socially weird. Twitchy. Didn't really hold eye contact. His voice cracked when he talked. He gave me a quick tour, and the place actually wasn't bad. My room was clean, already furnished, open layout, nothing fancy, but I wasn't in a position to complain. And despite the awkward vibe, something about him made me think, okay, maybe he's just shy. Harmless. I convinced myself the rules were just his way of keeping control. I needed a roof, and he had one. I moved in that same weekend. In hindsight, I probably should have asked more questions. For the first couple weeks, things were fine, I guess. As fine as they can be when you're living with someone who won't make eye contact and has more house rules than a high school dorm. But what got to me wasn't anything obvious. It was the quiet. The house was too quiet. Like you'd think that'd be a good thing, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind where you could hear your own thoughts turning on you. Evan had told me he'd be out most of the time, work, errands, whatever. But it didn't take long to notice that his car basically never left the driveway. Like maybe once every few days. I started to wonder if he was working from home, but I never heard him. No phone calls, no typing, no TV, no signs of life from his room. Just silence, except at night. That's when things got weird. I'd be lying in bed and I'd hear footsteps. Not faint, not creaky house stuff. Actual, deliberate footsteps. Sometimes a door would open or close. Sometimes I'd hear a chair move, or the sound of something being dragged. Always subtle enough that I'd question if I imagined it, but I didn't. One night, I got up to use the bathroom, and I noticed the basement door was cracked open. That weird half-open way, like it hadn't been left like that on purpose. There was this dull glow coming from down there, like a light on in a room tucked out of sight. I froze, and that's when I saw him. Evan, just standing there at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me, not saying anything, no expression on his face, not angry exactly, but off, like I'd seen something I shouldn't have, and I couldn't move, just stood there while everything in my gut screamed that I wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't like I was snooping or anything. I was just bored one afternoon trying to straighten this crooked picture frame that had been bugging me for days. The wall was thin and the frame barely stayed up, so I figured I'd just take it down and reset it. And that's when I noticed it. The glint. Just this little flash of reflection near the top of the wall, coming from behind one of those old metal vents. You know, the kind painted over a dozen times, practically welded shut by layers of cheap white gloss. I don't even know what made me check. Curiosity? Nerves? I stood on a chair, unscrewed the vent, and there it was. A camera, tiny, tucked all the way in the back, pointing straight into my room. The little red light was blinking. I held it in my hand for a good minute, just staring at it. My brain couldn't land on anything solid. Like, was it even real? Was I imagining this? I kept telling myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe it was something old, not plugged in, something left by a previous tenant, anything to not go where my mind was starting to go. Later I tried to bring it up. Casual, like I didn't want to start a fight. I remember standing in the hallway, awkwardly mentioning I found this thing in the vent. Evan didn't react at all. No surprise, no guilt, no denial, just sort of shrugged it off like it was nothing. And the worst part, I let it slide. I just nodded, went back to my room, and sat on my bed with the vent still open. I still don't really understand why I didn't press harder. Maybe I didn't want to know the answer. I'm not careless. I know that for a fact. Every time I left the house, I locked my door. Every single time. It wasn't even a conscious habit anymore. It was muscle memory. Key, turn, check the handle. It's what made me feel like I still had some control in that house. So when I came back one evening and saw the door to my room slightly cracked open, I just stood there, frozen. My stomach dropped. I stared at that gap in the doorway like it was staring back at me. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd been in a rush that morning. Maybe I didn't turn the key all the way. Maybe. But the second I stepped in, I knew things weren't wrong exactly, but they weren't right either. My dresser drawers weren't the way I left them, like someone had gone through them and tried to put them back without really knowing how I organized things. Some of my clothes were folded differently. The closet door, which I always kept shut, was slightly open. Just a crack, like someone peeked in and didn't bother closing it fully. Nothing was missing, at least not that I could tell, but it wasn't about theft. It was the fact that someone had been in there, in my space, touching my stuff, breathing the air I sleep in. That feeling, it's like something gets under your skin and stays there, gnawing. I asked Evan about it later, brought it up like I wasn't accusing him, just wondering. He didn't blink, just said I had the only key, like that was supposed to be the end of it. I wanted to believe him. I really wanted to believe him, but my gut wasn't convinced, and it hadn't been for a while. It wasn't like I was desperate to find answers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something was wrong, and I had to figure out what it was. After that night with the camera and the strange things in my room, I started noticing just how much of the house I didn't know, and the basement, Evan's no-go zone, kept eating away at me. I'd seen the door cracked open that night, and I couldn't get it out of my head. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was more like this heavy need to understand what the hell was really going on. I waited until I knew he was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway. The keys weren't in the bowl. Just the usual silence. That's when I decided to go down there. The moment I stepped into the basement, I realized I'd made a mistake. The light didn't work. The whole room felt like it was sealed off from the rest of the house. It wasn't dark enough to be pitch black, but it was too dark to feel safe. I had to use the flashlight on my phone to even see anything. And then, the smell hit me. At first, I thought it was just mold or old carpet, but no, it was heavier. Damp, sure, but something else. Something sour, like rotting meat mixed with wet earth. I tried to ignore it, but it wasn't easy. The first thing I saw was this old, stained couch sitting awkwardly in the middle of the room. Looked like it hadn't been moved in years. The carpet was all bunched up at the corners, like it had been laid down wrong and no one cared enough to fix it. And the boxes, so many boxes, sealed tight, taped up, shoved into every corner like they were trying to hide something. But the worst part was the door, tucked away in the farthest corner of the basement. It was locked. I don't know what I was expecting, but the smell coming from behind that door, it was unlike anything I've ever smelled before. I stood there for a long time, frozen, my flashlight shaking in my hand. My brain was screaming at me to turn around, to just leave it alone. But something kept me in that room, staring at that door, as if whatever was behind it was calling me. I left before I could get any closer. I didn't even want to know anymore. Not really. I don't even know how to explain it. One night I was sleeping, or at least trying to. It was that kind of light, uneasy sleep where you're not really out but you're not awake either. That's when I heard it. The creak, the floorboard near the foot of my bed. I froze. My heart slammed against my chest, my mind trying to make sense of the noise. I was barely awake, but I knew something was wrong. And then, before I could even think, let alone react, he was just there, standing next to my bed, looking at me. Evan. I could feel the air shift, like I was suffocating. My body locked up. I don't even remember what I thought in that moment. My room had been locked. I know it had. I checked. I always checked. So how the hell was he in here, standing there as calm as could be? He said something to me, but I don't remember what. My brain couldn't catch up to the reality of what was happening. It felt like a nightmare, like I was in a dream where the rules didn't apply anymore. I don't even think I responded to him. My mouth just went dry. I don't remember moving, but somehow he just turned around and left the room. And that was it. Like it wasn't even weird for him. Like it didn't matter that he'd been in my room, uninvited, just as slow and calm as ever. Like it was his right to be there. He didn't even seem fazed. It's like I wasn't even a part of the equation. I sat there, staring at the door, wide awake, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind couldn't piece it together. How? I didn't sleep after that, not really. I stayed there, eyes fixed on the door, too scared to close my eyes, too shaken to move. It felt like everything I knew about that house, about him, was slowly unraveling, and I couldn't stop it. I didn't even wait for morning. I just grabbed everything I could, threw it all into bags. Whatever didn't fit, I left behind. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered but getting out of that house. I couldn't even look at the place anymore. I knocked on Evan's door once, just a light tap, like maybe that would make this all feel more normal. But when he cracked the door open, I could barely meet his eyes. He didn't even look at me when he handed me a wad of cash, money for the time I'd been there, I guess. I didn't count it. I didn't care. I just grabbed it, shoved it in my pocket, and walked out. I didn't even say goodbye. What was the point? He didn't even seem to care that I was leaving. The whole thing felt like I was already gone, like nothing had really ever mattered. I left that house behind, and I didn't look back. That night, I slept in my car, parked in some empty lot across town. I couldn't bring myself to go anywhere else. I didn't trust anyone at that point, not even myself. I called my parents the next day, even though I swore I wouldn't. I told them everything that happened, everything I'd seen. They were shocked, but somehow, things were better after that. They let me back in, welcomed me like I hadn't just turned my back on them weeks ago. But even now, looking back, I don't really understand it. I don't get what he was doing. I don't know if I was in real danger, or if I just narrowly escaped something worse. The whole experience feels like a dream, like maybe I imagined it. But the weird thing is, those little moments, the things I didn't notice at the time, they stay with me. I still check every vent when I move into a new place, every time, even now, just in case. Looking back, I don't even know what I was thinking. It wasn't like I had a lot of options. I needed a place, and fast. My situation at home had fallen apart, and I was stuck, no place to stay, no real direction. Then, out of nowhere, this ad pops up for a cheap room in a 2-bedroom apartment, just on the edge of town, not too far from campus. At first glance, it seemed like a lifeline. Max seemed fine when I met him. A little stiff maybe, but who isn't? He was polite, but not in the way people usually are. It was like he had been practicing for this moment, rehearsing how to seem friendly, how to look approachable. You know the type, always with a little too much eye contact, a little too many questions about your personal life. He told me he had lived with a lot of roommates, and everything about him screamed normal, too normal. There were little things that should have tipped me off, looking back, like when he casually mentioned that the basement was off limits. He said it with such nonchalance that it didn't even register at first. He acted like it was some minor detail that didn't need further explanation. I didn't push, didn't think twice. Maybe I was just desperate to find a place. Maybe I was tired of questioning everything. So, I moved in that weekend, like it was no big deal. It wasn't a permanent solution, just a stopgap, a temporary fix. I convinced myself that things would be fine, and for a little while they were. I didn't see any reason to dig deeper into Max's little quirks. At least, not yet. I should have listened to that nagging feeling in the back of my mind, the one that told me not everything was as it seemed. It's hard to put into words, but Max never really left. His car stayed parked in the same spot, every day, every night. I'd see it there, just sitting in the parking lot, and it didn't make sense. He'd tell me all these stories about work, errands, friends visiting, but I never saw him leave. It wasn't like he was constantly around, but there was this presence. You know the kind? Not loud, not in your face, just a feeling that someone was always there, always nearby. And it was like this constant static. The apartment always felt full, even when we didn't really talk. He wasn't doing anything overt, but it was as if Max was always lingering, even when he wasn't. It was subtle, but it was real. At night, when I tried to sleep, I'd hear things, quiet things, footsteps, shuffling noises, nothing that could have been called normal. I tried to convince myself it was just the apartment settling, or maybe I was being paranoid. After all, I had just moved in, and I was adjusting. But no, it was something else. There was a rhythm to it, a sort of restless energy that made me feel like I was never really alone, even when I was in my room with the door shut. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I heard something from the hallway. At first, it was just the faintest shuffle, but then it got clearer. It wasn't just footsteps, it was Max. He was standing at the bottom of the basement stairs, just standing there, staring up at me. That look, I can't shake it. There was something off about it, something I can't explain. It wasn't anger, but it wasn't friendly either. It was like I wasn't supposed to see him, like I was intruding on something that wasn't meant for me. I still don't know what I was supposed to do with that moment. I wasn't even looking for it. Not really. I was just trying to fix a crooked picture frame. I'd been living in that apartment for a while, and one day as I moved to straighten it, my eyes caught something, a tiny glimmer behind the vent near the ceiling. It was barely noticeable, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. A small red light, flickering in the dark. I didn't immediately think much of it. I mean, why would I? It didn't even make sense. I pulled the vent cover off, and there it was. A tiny hidden camera sitting innocently on the ceiling, recording. I don't know why I didn't freak out right away. Maybe I was in shock, or maybe I thought I was imagining things. What was I even supposed to think? I stared at it for what felt like hours, holding it in my hand, trying to convince myself that it wasn't what it looked like, that there was some logical reason for it, that it wasn't some invasion of privacy or some sick way of watching me. But in my gut, I knew what it was. I knew exactly what it meant, but I didn't ask him about it right away. I don't know why I didn't. Part of me was scared. Part of me didn't want to face the truth. I shoved the camera in a drawer and pretended I hadn't found it, just for a little while. When I finally did bring it up to Max, though, it was like he couldn't even comprehend what I was talking about. He just shrugged it off, dismissed it like it was no big deal, like I was crazy for even bringing it up. "It's nothing," he said, like he had an answer for everything. But it didn't sit right. Why didn't I push harder? Why didn't I demand answers? I don't understand why I just let it slide. Why didn't I leave right then? I always locked my room. Every single time. I don't care how rushed I was. I always made sure that door was locked. So when I came back one afternoon and found my door slightly cracked open, I froze. It wasn't wide open, just a little, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. I stood there staring at it, trying to talk myself into believing I'd just forgotten. Maybe I'd been in a hurry and didn't turn the key all the way. It wasn't like me, but it was the only explanation that made sense, right? But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something felt off. In Narration, I pushed the door open and stepped inside, not wanting to see what I knew I would see. But there it was. Proof. My drawers were open, not all of them, but enough to be noticeable. My clothes were folded in ways that weren't mine, like someone had rifled through them. And in my closet door, it was ajar, just a crack. But it shouldn't have been. I never left it like that. I tried to make sense of it, tried to tell myself that maybe I hadn't locked the door after all, that maybe I was misremembering. But that feeling didn't go away. It gnawed at me, growing louder in the back of my mind. Someone had been in my room. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the truth. So I asked Max. I needed answers, but when I brought it up, he just looked at me, confused, almost annoyed. "You're the only one with a key," he said, like I was overreacting. His words should have been reassuring, but they didn't do anything to calm me. They just made my heart race faster. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I didn't. I don't know why I waited so long to do something about it. Maybe I thought it would just resolve itself, or that the answers would find me without me having to dig for them. But one day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Max was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway, and the apartment felt emptier than it usually did. That was my moment. The one chance I had. I didn't want to go down there. I really didn't. But I couldn't stop myself. It was like something inside of me. Some deep pull was dragging me to that basement. When I opened the door, I was hit with the smell first. That thick, musty scent. Damp, old. like something had been rotting down there for years. The air was colder too, a sharp chill that seeped into my bones. The light didn't work, of course, but I had my phone flashlight to guide me. It flickered a little, but it was enough. The basement was strangely silent. Too quiet, like the kind of silence that feels oppressive, like something was waiting for me to make a sound, and then I saw it. The couch. It wasn't just old, it was stained, in ways I didn't want to think about, and there were boxes, stacked haphazardly against the walls. Some were sealed shut, like they were hiding something important, but the worst part was the door. In the corner, it was locked, but the feeling it gave off, it was wrong. I didn't even need to see what was behind it to know that. The smell that wafted from under the door made my stomach turn, like something had died there. I remember standing there, staring at that door, for what felt like forever. My legs were frozen, my body refusing to move. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally turned and left. I didn't want to know what was on the other side, but more than that, something told me, some instinct deep down, that I needed to leave, that I was treading too close to something I wasn't supposed to see. That was the last time I went down there, and even now, I wonder if I missed something, if I was supposed to uncover something hidden beneath all of it. I don't know what woke me up. Maybe it was the feeling of something being wrong, or maybe it was just the silence that had suddenly become too thick. But I wasn't woken by the sound of a door opening. No, it was the sound of footsteps. Quiet at first, but getting closer, coming toward me. I didn't know how to explain it, but I knew my door was locked. I always locked it. I was sure of it. But there he was. Max, standing at the side of my bed, looking down at me. Calm, so damn calm. It was like he had every right to be there. No rush, no panic, just there. And I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. My body was frozen. My mind was in a blur. I don't even know if he said anything to me. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I couldn't register it. For what felt like a long time, we just stared at each other. Or maybe I was just staring at him. I don't know. My head was swimming. But then, as casually as he'd come in, he turned and walked out. The door clicked behind him. I didn't move. I didn't even know if I could move. I just stayed there, staring at the door, the whole time wondering how he had gotten in. Had I forgotten to lock it? No, no way. I always locked it. The lock was solid. I had to have locked it, but there was no other explanation. I stayed up the rest of the night, just lying there, wide-eyed. I don't even remember what I was thinking. My brain kept going over and over the same questions, trying to make sense of it. How had he gotten in? Why hadn't I heard him? How did he manage to stand there without me waking up until it was too late? I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I don't even know why I didn't wait until morning. I think maybe I was afraid of what would happen if I stayed one more minute. If I gave myself the chance to think it through. I just grabbed whatever I could, throwing clothes, books, whatever into bags in a chaotic rush. I wasn't even thinking straight. Honestly, I didn't care about the mess. I didn't care about anything except getting the hell out of there. I didn't know if Max was home, but I knocked on his door anyway. When he opened it, he didn't even look at me. His eyes were flat, like I was just another part of the furniture. He handed me a wad of cash, and I didn't even bother counting it. I didn't care about anything anymore except leaving. I didn't go anywhere specific. I just drove, parked in a random lot, and slept in my car. I didn't know where else to go, and I didn't care. The next day, though, I called my parents. I had sworn I wouldn't ever call them. But that night, I did. I told them everything. Things got better after I moved out. But there's still this nagging feeling. I still can't shake the questions. What was Max really doing in that apartment? What was going on down there? In that basement? I'll never know. And I can't stop wondering if I was somehow in real danger, or if I was just overthinking everything. Maybe I just barely missed something, or maybe it was all in my head. But even now, every time I move into a new place, I check the vents, I check the locks, I check everything, just in case.